This happened to me a few years ago. I was in high school at the time and I would usually get home by going through the local park not too far away. It probably took longer for me to get home this way, but the alternative was a narrow sidewalk next to a busy road. At least going through the park was peaceful, and I would occasionally bump into some friends on the way. On this particular night, however, the park seemed a lot emptier than usual. Not that I minded walking alone, given that the area was relatively safe and nothing dangerous or even remotely interesting ever really happened around here. As I arrived halfway through the park, I noticed something rather strange. Someone had left some of their things on one of the park benches. At first I thought it was just some trash that someone hadn't bothered to throw away, but as I got closer, I could see that there were in fact belongings, some of which were valuable. Despite what I said about the area being safe, it still seemed like a pretty bad idea to leave things out in the open. My initial conclusion was that perhaps a dog escaped from its leash and the owner ran after it, so I decided to adopt a sense of civic duty by sticking around for a while until someone showed up. After waiting for at least 15 minutes, I started to wonder if anyone was going to show up that night. Come to think of it, I hadn't seen another soul since I entered the park. I decided that I had already waited long enough, and it was getting quite late. I thought about taking the belongings with me, but I didn't want it to look like I was stealing, so I just ignored it and moved on. Then, just as I started walking, I heard something run past me. I heard it again just moments later, and it seemed even louder this time around. Something didn't feel right, and for whatever reason, I just started walking away very fast. I felt instantly relieved as I approached the end of the park, but this feeling turned out to be extremely short-lived, as I noticed a large shadow blocking the way to the exit. The vague silhouette suggested large animal features that seemed almost predatory in nature, and I instantly felt threatened by its appearance. It stared back at me with its large eyes as if it were trying to anticipate my next move, yet remained surprisingly still and silent. I wasn't very keen on the idea of closing any more distance between myself and whatever it was that stood in my way, and given an inherent fear of the unknown, I decided to turn around and quickly head back the same way I came. I refrained from running, but only because I thought doing so may provoke it to start chasing after me. My heart was pounding, but I tried to stay calm as I cautiously made my way back. I didn't want to reveal that I was afraid, but I found myself counting every step forward, hoping that I wasn't being followed. I couldn't even bear to look behind me at this point, but it was only moments later when I realized I didn't need to. The same dark silhouette appeared once again, blocking the path ahead of me, this time considerably closer. I slowly backed away without breaking any eye contact with the creature. It seemed content to let me go as I continued to back further and further away, which is when I discovered the true horror of the situation. I was being stalked not by one, but two creatures that were blocking my only means of escape. There was no other way out. Like hungry sharks, they began to circle around me, slowly closing in for the kill. Then suddenly, I heard something in the distance, followed by small, subtle impacts on the ground around me. The sound of the rain appeared to startle them, and they soon ran for cover as it continued to get stronger. I never thought I would be so happy to catch the rain that day, and I was relieved to get home safely. It took me a couple of months to build up the courage to start using the park again after that. The only thing I knew for sure was that getting caught by the rain was the least of my worries.
1960s, my great-uncle John was traveling by train from his village to another to visit family. He had to change trains at one point and was dropped off at what amounted to a platform and a hut in the middle of nowhere. There was no one at the station, and other than a dirt road that led off into the surrounding woods, there was nothing there. He waited for some time, but no train came. It was winter and getting colder and darker, and just about the time he started worrying about a place to stay and some food to eat, an old woman appeared out of the twilight. She asked if he was waiting for a train, and when he said he was, she said it wouldn't be along until the following day. She asked if he needed a bed for the night, and offered him a meal and a room at her house. He was glad to accept her offer and stay out of the cold. He took his suitcase and they set off together down the dark road into the forest. It was more than an hour away, and by the time they arrived at the woman's small 2-story house, John was tired and hungry. They went inside and the woman lit some oil lamps and warmed some borscht for them. John finished his soup and asked where he would be sleeping. She led him up to the stairs to a tiny room with a window that contained a single bed and nothing else. He thanked her, they said goodnight, and she closed the door. Then she locked it, leaving him in the dark. Somewhat creeped out by this, John called to her, but she didn't answer and he heard nothing else. Figuring he would deal with it in the morning and that she had probably done it by mistake, John set his suitcase down and laid on the bed. Before he could fall asleep though, he felt the urge to pee and got out of bed, hoping to find a chamber pot or something he could pee in. He got onto his hands and knees and began to feel under the bed in the darkness, thinking that's where the pot would be if there was one. He found the body. John went right to the window to see if he could exit the room that way. It was nailed shut. He knew that if he remained in the room, he was probably a dead man. But if he broke the window and tried to get out of the way, there was a good chance that the old woman would hear him and come into the room before he could get away. So he did the only thing he could do. He pulled the body from under the bed, heaved it onto the mattress, and covered it with a blanket. Then he got under the bed and waited. Sure enough, about an hour later, he heard footsteps coming slowly up the stairs and then toward the room. The lock clicked and the knob turned slowly. In the gloom, John saw someone moving toward the bed. Then he heard several sickening thuds. The person had bashed the body on the bed with a large crowbar, which then dropped onto the floor right in front of John. There was silence. Then the person went out the room and the door was shut again. John moved from under the bed and took the crowbar and was able to slowly pry the window open. When the window was up, he threw his suitcase out and dove through himself, not caring what was below him, only worried about what was behind. He landed without too much injury and began to run into a field behind the house towards some light in the far distance. It turned out to be a highway with some military and transport trucks on it, and luckily John was able to get a ride to another village where he could catch a train. He didn't bother reporting what had happened to the authorities, since at that time in the USSR, there was a distinct chance he would have been the one who got into trouble. He just thanked God he had escaped and decided that the next time he traveled to visit relatives, he would take another way.